Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Shadow Self, A Journey Within. Joanne and I are really excited to be back again, and we're very excited about our next guest. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Todd.
How are you tonight?
I'm really good.
Good, good. So I'm excited about our next guest. Her name is Vicky Willoughby, and we would like to welcome her. Hey, Vicky, how are you?
I'm awesome, Todd. Thanks for asking.
Great, great. So could you give the listeners a little bit about your background and what you do?
Oh, sure. I'm a native of upstate New York. I've been working in assorted healing modalities over the course of a long period of time. Reflexology since the 70s. I've been a teaching Reiki Master since 2000 in the Usui method. And I'm a young living educator and a reverend. I have many spokes on my wheel and wear many hats. I also have started working with the emotion code in the last couple of years and have had some really interesting results with that.
Yes, I've had some emotion code too, and it is a very interesting modality. I've found it very, very interesting, very helpful.
I also have had some emotion code done, and I didn't realize how deep the emotions can go and how far back they can go. Like a 2-year old can have an emotion that they hold from something that happened, especially if it was traumatic, and that emotion can stay with the body. And Vicky's here with us tonight to share some of her experiences with that emotion coding. And as you know, we're the shadow self, a journey within. So you have to go within yourself. And Vicky has a nice twist on this because she doesn't really call it the shadow self. She calls it the inner child. And as we say, we strip away the mask. Vicky's going to explain that she doesn't feel we're stripping away anything. We're using it to our advantage and we're incorporating it. So I'm going to have Vicky go ahead and share that and explain that to us, Vicky, how you do that, and explain to us how you change the name and how you have the client or the person incorporate it in their body and in everyday usage.
Okay.
A two-part question, maybe, and take your time. And
Well, I'll try not to give you a 47-part answer.
okay,
Well, I've been working doing what I call inner child work, soul retrieval work. You could put all kinds of different names on it, and you could call it connecting with the shadow self as well. And how it has morphed into the emotion code, it's kind of going from both ends because the inner child work I've done in the past is basically using the emotions that are coming up for a person. Like if you're constantly triggered into anger or constantly feeling guilt or whatever those emotions are, then I would work with people and have them use that emotion as the red thread, so to speak, back to the part of themselves when they were younger that something traumatic or upsetting, it doesn't necessarily have to be traumatic, just something upsetting to them was held in their emotional body, that it keeps coming up and keeps coming up and keeps coming up. And from my point of view, it's a matter of there being something in your energy field that is less than love. And so it calls to love to be healed. So when someone is consistently coming to anger, then we would use that. I would turn them back into themselves and say, who is angry? Who is feeling abandoned? Who is feeling afraid? Whatever word they would put on the emotion, to ask into themselves. And often you'd get a view or a feel or just a resonance of a memory of, oh God, is he going to come home and slam the door and start yelling? Are they going to fight? Is it, something where your parent was abusive and you were hurt and there was just nobody to love you through that situation. And those things will stay in our energy field. It's almost like a dissonance or a static or a stuckness. Um, that will repeat through people when they're dealing with anything that sort of trips that emotion, anything that's close to that channel on the dial, so to speak, and they will sort of run home to mama, or maybe that part that feels unloved uses that as a place to try to get attention of the adult to give love to that spot so that it can heal and come into wholeness. And after starting work with the emotion code, what I'm finding is that rather than using the emotion that's coming up to follow it back to that place, that this method reveals an emotion that is stuck if the body will allow it. And then you sort of, it's like find the stuck emotion, release that, and the connection of that can often bring a lot of revelation and understanding. But when the emotions are released from the energy field, the response is virtually instantaneous. And it's amazing to where, in the past years, people go through years of therapy and counseling and even using the rescue of the inner child, so to speak, and taking the adult energy and applying it to oneself, to one's inner child, to one's hurt moments. Um, and it doesn't, we think that it has to be some big traumatic thing, but it can be as simple as one person I was working with. It seemed like he just felt like he was bad. And I said, "Who was the first person to tell you you were bad?" And right, no hesitation, my third grade principal. And this is someone who is over 40 years old. And because of a person who was in authority that he was taught to respect, said, "You're bad." He took that on like it was a meaning to his soul and lived through that. So it could be just the most innocuous thing that you don't even realize. And then with the emotion code as well, I'm able to connect to uncover and release emotions that don't even necessarily belong to the person because they can be inherited through our bloodline.
And do you feel also it can be through ancestral, like even the bloodline, and it can go further back ancestral and like great grandparents and great great grandparents and
Well, I think those things are passed on as far as, the emotion is being carried by the next. And certainly, yes, like the very first person that I really had good success with working with emotion code with, we trace back to an emotion of hopelessness that once we asked the body, we found out that it was imparted to her during her gestational period because her mother was pregnant during the early 1960s by someone she ought not have been pregnant by.
mm,
So she had an overarching feeling of hopelessness about it, and that imparted to her child so that she carried that for 50 years before we were able to release it. And the way it displayed in her life was that she's the most hopeful person I know, but about hopeless things and a definite people pleaser. And once we started to release emotions that, like the one with her mother, I don't know how else you would come to that because you're not going to find it through psychotherapy or even hypnosis because it didn't belong to her in the first place. It wasn't her emotion to be found by her, but through her energy field and through using the kinesiology, we were able to connect with that. And then just, even though it wasn't hers to release, just the knowing that it wasn't hers was a relief in and of itself.
that's fascinating. Okay, so Vicky, now that we've shared all that great information, can you go in and explain to us exactly what emotional coding is for the listeners out there that may have not had it done or don't have a grasp or concept on it? Could you go ahead and explain to the listeners what it is? A good definition or explanation for our listeners.
Oh, sure. The emotion code, as I do it, is based on the book of Dr. Bradley Nelson, who was a chiropractor and discovered through his work with people that he could get answers from the body using kinesiology or muscle testing, whichever way it's called by different names. And that using the muscle testing and asking the body to answer, or because the electrical or the energetic body is like connected with our innate being, and it will answer truthfully through the body using kinesiology. So this is a process that he devised. It includes what's called an emotion code chart. And it entails using a method of kinesiology. You can use different methods. His favorite and my favorite is the sway test. And literally, each person can individually do the sway test to get yes and no answers to things. And you just ask the body, show me yes, show me no. And if your body is testable, meaning that it will answer accurately, because they don't always, for assorted different reasons. It could be that you're dehydrated, it could be that you're under enough stress, and your innate being knows that this isn't something that you can handle right then. um there are assorted reasons why different things happen with that. But when you use the muscle testing and are able to ask the body if it has any trapped emotions that you can release at that time, then it will very specifically tell you. And he has two different dialogues that are suggested for this. And one is in relation to trapped emotions, and the other is in relation to heart walls, which is a very similar thing. It's just sometimes when we feel so hurt, we'll literally build a wall around our heart. And people can be experiencing both at the same time. So either dialogue can be used, or both, according to, you always use your own discretion if you're working with someone else. And if it's for yourself, then you just decide what you'd like to do. But the emotion code chart is broken down in such a way that it's easy to use yes and no questions to isolate what you're really looking for. There's a column A, column B, there's row 1 through 6. And so you ask the body, is there a trapped emotion that we can release now? And if the body says no, then you can say, is there an inherited trapped emotion we can release now? And it might say no to that too. And then you can ask if there's a hidden heart wall and if we could release that. If the body just says no, 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 then you really can't move forward with it. It's a process of following the yes, but assuming that the body is testable and will answer correctly and will give affirmative answers, you isolate column A or column B, and then you isolate, is it an odd row or an even row? And then you ask per row, once you narrow it down that far. And say somebody is responding yes to an emotion in column B, row 3. It narrows it down to 5 emotions of confusion, defensiveness, grief, self-abuse, and stubbornness. And you can ask the body yes or no through each of those emotions, and you're just looking to get the yes. And once you do, on this chart, also along with each of the rows, it indicates parts of the body that is most probably connected with. Like for the column B, row 3, for those 5 emotions that I read off, it could be associated with your lungs or your colon, either way. So it'll give you an indication right on the chart of where you're looking at in the body. But also you can ask the body, first you can say, would you like to know more about this? If the body says no, just get rid of it, then you just clear it. And the clearing of it is done with magnets. And this is not a process where you got to buy certain magnets, you got to do a certain thing. You can go take a letter A off your refrigerator. It really doesn't matter, except that it needs to be magnetic, because you're operating with the governor channel, which is known to people that do yoga and things of that nature and are aware of the energetic body. And you touch the magnets to the spot between the eyebrows on the forehead at the top of the nose. And then you just run the magnets over your skull. You can do it yourself and just run them down as far as you can reach down the back of your neck. If you're doing it for someone else, then you would run it down to their tailbone. And once you put that magnetism into that energetic field where the connection with that emotion is active, and you draw that through the energetic field, it literally, like a magnet, will pick up, a nail that's on the floor as you run across it. It will snatch that out of your energetic field and literally release it. And if you're doing it for another person and it's their own emotion, not an inherited emotion, then you do that swipe 3 times. If it's an inherited emotion, then you do the swipe 10 times. And then you can confirm with the body, have we succeeded in releasing this emotion? And the body will say yes or no, one way or the other. I've only gotten a no once because it was a student who was holding on to anxiety about going to college. And we might have released past anxiety, but it was really a current anxiety of something that hadn't happened yet. So the body was like, nope, sorry, not done with it. I'm sticking around with this for a while. But you can decide how far you want to ask questions as you move through with it. You can ask, at what age was this emotion trapped? And usually I ask the person's age and cut it in half and say, if they were 50, did it happen before you were 25? Was it before you were 10? And just follow that to whatever age is indicated. And it's really an amazing process because people will get connected with an emotion, and then you ask, when was this? And you dial them mentally back to that time period, and they're like, oh my goodness, that was when I got fired from my job. Oh, that was when I miscarried a baby. Oh, that was when my husband divorced me. That was when my parents died. That there's something major that was going on for them at that period of time that has remained there. I think of it as us being an energetic current because we are energy moving forward. And if you think about a stream, the stream can be free flowing and energetic and beautiful. But when you start to throw rocks into the stream, then the stream will start to have different currents in it. It will start to slow down. It will start to not flow as effectively as it did previously. And if you throw enough stones into the stream, then it can back up entirely and become a pool, a cesspool, backed up behind that. Once that happens, then you really are basically all backed up in a cesspool of emotions that can manifest in all kinds of different ways. And, like we said, it can be traced back to some place in your history that's not even necessarily about you, but it can decidedly affect your physical body as far as ailments are concerned. It can also affect your life as a whole because of how you make choices in relation to how that is putting that blockage in your energy field. And it's also a process where you work with people little by little, because I've never cleared any more than 5 emotions for anyone at a time, since it is a process of clearing. And if you think of it from the stream point of view as well, it you don't want to cause a flood downstream. I'll put it that way. That if you take 3 or 4 rocks out of the stream, it will flow more effectively. Things will start to move, and it will be obvious in the way your life happens that that has happened. But if you were to take all the rocks out of the stream at one time, then it would be an awful lot to deal with. And the body has an inherent knowledge of that, along with the innate being, and it won't let you do that. It'll get to a point, and it's different for everybody. It's very individual. That's why I still feel that I'm practicing with it, because it's like mapping no man's land. That it's totally uncharted territory. Nobody's ever been here before, including the person that you're dealing with, prospectively. So it's just the process of finding the emotions, using the magnetics to clear it, going to the extent that the body will allow, and in total respect of it the entire time. And also, just for any other energy workers out there, I find it necessary to do it before any other energy work, because if you've already put tasks on the body, so to speak, it won't respond to anything any further. At least that's been my experience with it. It might be different for others. Anyway, have I effectively answered your question, Joanne?
Yes, you have. And that leads me to another question because, like in some Reikis, I've learned that some people are taught the governor and functional channel and some aren't. So that's very interesting to me. And then another thing that it leads me into is some are also taught what are the energy bodies and some are not. So, like you said, different modalities, different teachers, different ways of teaching or hearing how things are taught. Again, it's perception. None one way right or wrong. So I would like you to explain what are the energy bodies, because you have a spiritual body, an emotional body, a physical body. So if you could give the layers or the some people call them beings. You know, what are the layers of the like what like some people say your spiritual body's first, your then your being, then your emotional body. But again, it's I don't know how it in the book that you learn from which layers first or how do you see it? You know, could you explain it to us? Explain it to the listeners.
Well, as written by Bradley Nelson, he doesn't really address layers, so to speak,
Okay.
because he's dealing from a kind of a straight practitioner and has to be acceptable to the public sort of point of view, I think. Um, but that energetic channel is known to people that do yoga as well, besides Reiki practitioners. But it's the governor and the functional channel. It's if you put the tip of your tongue to right behind your teeth on the roof of your mouth, then that connects one end of the channel. And if you do what basically amounts to a Kegel, or like if you were stopping urine flow, that same contraction of the pelvic floor that you would do connects on the other end for purposes of doing healing work. And for this purpose, it just deals with the governor part of that channel, not the functional part. And as far as energetic bodies are concerned, it would depend on which perspective you were looking at. Because if you're looking from an outer perspective, then I would consider the spiritual body to be first from that point of view. But since we're all here in bodies, I would look at it more from that perspective, that there's the physical, which is surrounded by the energetic. If you've ever seen a picture of our toroidal field, or you can Google it, um, it basically looks like an energy donut with us being in the center of it. And then there's our connection, you know, our higher self connection to all that is, which I would consider our spiritual being. Um, that's just for my purposes. And if you Google a picture of the toroidal field and see, it's almost like looking at the grid of the Earth, because the Earth has its own toroidal field. And everything, it's considered that everything happens in the energetic body or in the emotional body before it happens in the physical body, that things tend to get stuck, even if it's an injury. Like say it's a sports injury, underlying there might be something about that person that they don't want to succeed, because they don't want to have to follow the route that would entail in every place that would take them. Or it might, you never know what somebody's investment in it is and why they would choose. It might even be that that someone else they thought deserved to win or whatever, so they might get an injury just to, you can never know. Working with one person in particular, she was going through a very traumatic situation with her home life, that her grandchildren had been left by their mother to move to a different state to set them up there, and in the meantime left them with the non-custodial father without his consent, because he worked 16 days at a time um, and couldn't be there to be in supervision of them all the time, so they went to grandma's house. And it was too much for a retired person. And I said, you need to learn to say no. You need to learn to say no. And she just wasn't doing it. And she said, I need a break. I need a break. And I said, well, you're going to have to give it to yourself, because the situation is not conducive to that. Well, within the next 2 weeks, she fell in her front yard on wet grass. She lived there for 50 years and slipped on wet grass, fell, and broke her leg. Uh, it's the right calf, which that's the man's side. Our masculine expression comes out on that side. And the legs are about support and forward motivation. And she broke her leg in 3 places. And in the process of her having the grandchildren, there was also a 10-week-old pit bull pup that was provided for the children with no training or anybody to initiate it. So 3 breaks on her leg to me says girl, boy, dog on the man's side. That's where she needed a break. And she wasn't providing it for herself. So her innate being, or her body, however you want to quantify it, took that over for her and said, okay, if you're not going to give yourself a break, then we'll give you a break. We'll give you 3 breaks. And that'll give you the big break where when you get out of rehab, the kids are gone to Florida. And the whole responsibility is gone. And people don't realize how much our emotional being really does affect the body. Myself, last year, I went into a situation where I had kidney stone activity and needed to deal with that. And I resolved it myself. But part of how the body manifests is kidney stones are significant of uncried tears and undissolved anger. And during my healing process, which fortunately I had the time and space to allow myself to do, I had to really reckon back in my own being all the way back to when I was a young child and come to terms with the fact that I was bullied by my parents using my father's ill health, to manipulate me and to, oh, honey, don't upset your father. You know, he had a heart condition, so everything was don't upset your father. And so I was required to toe the line or else. And truthfully, when I got the phone call that my father had passed 35 years ago, I didn't believe it because I didn't kill him. He can't be dead. I've been planning my whole life to be responsible for my father's demise. It can't be right. So in my process of going back through all of that and realizing how things had been done as I was growing up, I had to admit that my mother, who was like the salt of the earth for my whole family and for myself, especially being the baby of the family, that I had to go back and admit to myself that she was my original bully, and to sort of energetically stand toe to toe with her in relation to something that happened in my youth and say, how could you? Really? You know, as an adult woman, as a mother, and from that mature level, just on a soul level, communicate with her and say, how could you have done that to me? And reckon with the fact that she did. And every bit as much as I think she was just a full expression of love and the soft place to land in my life. And I love her dearly and wouldn't say a bad word about her. I, bite off my own tongue first. I also had to accept she was also my original bully and come to the wholeness of that. And that my father was as well. And bring that into my body with mature understanding, love the girl that happened to, and forgive the parents who didn't have any better to do at the time than what was done. And to bring myself into reckoning with that shadow and answer it with the light, because love is always the answer for those sort of things. But to me, that's how these things can hold in the body and can express, because they've held in the energetic field for so long that it affects the organ that it is attached to, just like it says on the emotion code chart. And that's another question that you can ask the body when doing the emotion code. And I've found that you can also reverse the dialogue. So instead of finding a particular emotion, say for somebody that knows that they have a thyroid issue, you can ask, is there a trapped emotion affecting my thyroid? And get a yes or no. And then you can either release it, just knowing that it's there, or you can chase it down to what is the specific emotion and when was it lodged. It just depends on how many answers the person wants. Some people are like, nope, just get it out of there. I don't care. Get rid of it. I'm ready for it to be gone. Get all this stuckness out of me. I'm ready to flow.
That's what I was going to say earlier, because the woman who had the break, she kept putting it in the universe because she was not able to say no herself, she kept saying, I need a break, I need a break, I need a break. So the universe gave her exactly what she was asking for. And for the young girl that you shared about, she was able to release old anxiety but not new anxiety, because sometimes we have a lesson to learn from what we are experiencing. And then there's also the people who just don't know how to fill the new empty space, so they keep that attachment because that's what they're used to. They just don't know how to fill it. And what I'm hearing you say is, we always just fill it with love. We just fill it with unconditional love. We just get rid of the disease, we get rid of whatever it is, the sadness, the negative terminology or the old emotion, and we refill it with unconditional love. Fill our being, our body with love and positivity, and go forward.
Well, to me, I don't think there's really a getting rid of anything.
Correct, you said that earlier. So we incorporate
That
love into where it was, where the new emotion.
how I how I would think of it is like a glass half empty, and it's looking to be filled. And once you fill it, then it's satisfied, so it doesn't need to ask any longer, because everything's asking it, and ye shall receive. And our body is very often asking, you know, or our emotional being very often asking. Um, but sometimes people just don't even know what it is. You know, it's like something's bothering me, or they never even connect that it's emotions at all. They're looking solely to the physical, which is what I'm finding a lot, especially since 2012, since the shift of energy that we've been through. And we literally have shifted. And to me, if you've ever driven a 5 speed, it's like going from third gear and winding it out and shift. Oh, thank goodness. And it just feels like an easier roll, but everything's moving so quickly and we're not really prepared for it. We're conditioned for a different world than the one that we're coming into. So I'm finding many people who are consistently looking for physical, biological means to solve what's going on with them, and repeatedly, repeatedly, repeatedly being disappointed. And the reason why is because whatever the prescription, whatever the recommendation is, it doesn't address that emotional component. And when they're still running the same monologue in their head, or running the same argument with themselves, they don't realize how much that actually impacts their physical being. And how, if, say you've just lost your job and your husband and you are splitting up because of the stress of that, you're liable to have issues in your legs, in your ankles, in your feet, in your knees, maybe in your hips as well, because the legs are about support and forward motivation. And anything around the hip area can also be support and forward motivation, but that's attached more to either your motherhood, how you were mothered, or your sexual being, because of the part of the body that entails. Grief is held in the lungs. Often, people that are grieving the loss of a loved one, and maybe even grieving the loss of a job they really loved, that they were downsized or something like that, that can manifest in the lungs, right along, the heartache, because that's the area we feel it. The lungs are right there as well and can be affected. Often, if people are having, especially women, I find them having issues in the middle of their back. And I typically ask them, do you wear the weight of the world on your shoulders? Yes, is the instant answer almost 100% of the time. I don't find it in retired people. And I don't find it in really young people in general, and women that I mostly deal with anyway. People that are having migraine headaches often, or issues with the throat, because the throat is always about speaking from your heart, because when we're being formed as human beings, the heart is the first thing to develop, and the next thing to develop is the tongue and the throat. So the throat is like the chimney of the heart. It's where we speak our heart from. And if we don't, and we're choking it back, choking it back. It's like, oh, I want to give him what for. Oh, he keeps treating me that way. Or, oh, that person at work, whatever it is, if you're stuffing your feelings, they land in the pit of your stomach and can cause other issues there, but they'll pile up, pile up, pile up, and literally come to a head, to where your head wants to explode. And most people have no concept that the body manifests that way and that it's very literal with what is going on, because the issue in our life will be to that part of the body. It's like, if you're constipated, what won't you let go? Literally. So people are like, how do you know these things? Well, to me, it's body language. But the beauty of the emotion code, in my experience, is how quickly and effectively it works. I mean, I had a friend one day come over. She literally was, sobbing, catching her breath in hysterics, just, and I calmed her down with a little bit of Reiki. And then we went through and cleared 4 emotional blocks for her. And I met her for dinner. And I spoke to her about our session that morning. She said, oh, that was so this morning. I am way past that now. And the first time that we had worked together, I had cleared 4 emotions for her then. And that evening, she called and said, something's different. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I am far more engaged with whether or not I'm enjoying my experience than whether anybody else is. I said, whoa, that's big stuff for a people pleaser. That was quite a revelation. So, and it's layers. That's another part about it that most people don't realize, is that there can be a trapped emotion for every event, even multiple events on the same day for whatever time period during your life. There can also be an end to it, because I've worked with a teenager who was getting ready to head to college, and we did some emotion code work, repeatedly. I saw her weekly, getting her detoxed and ready to go to college. And our last session, she said, the tools you have given me have changed my life and I am free now. And I said, no, the tools you have used have changed your life and you are free now, because I give tools to everybody and they often drop on the floor. But this young lady, who was particularly vibrant, tested clear of any trapped emotions, nothing left to unleash from her free-flowing stream. And then we checked again when she came back on Christmas break, nothing. Checked again or asked on spring break. She said, you know what? I think I'm good. Because a free-flowing stream, it'll knock the rocks around. It doesn't really get very affected. So once you can unblock those things that are holding there in your energy pattern, it really can't be predicted what can come next, because once that block is in your field and you're just used to working with that, you're not even necessarily conscious of any of it. But things move so quickly, they change so quickly. Things can come into your life and flow out of your life so quickly. It's been a really amazing response. And this is something, it's important to note as well, something that you can do for yourself, by yourself, for another person. It can be done by proxy and it can be done by surrogate, meaning that, say somebody's laying in a hospital bed and you're trying to see if they have an emotional blockage. One person can put their hand on the person in the hospital bed and clarify that they're asking for that person, connecting with that person's energy, and then they can do the investigating and they can do the clearing through the other person. It's also possible to do it at a distance. So, any distance, it really doesn't matter. You can do it anywhere in the world, and you can also do it for animals.
See, that's what Todd and I believe too. Todd is always sending a lot of his he does Skype and distance, and you have a lot of people requesting that from you, Todd, for energy work. And he adds a crystal grid, and um, he does a lot more of that than I do. Um,
Yeah, I've had some successful sessions via Skype doing distance Reiki, and I am an intuitive empath. So as I'm working even through Skype, I can be able to visualize them and actually I can travel there to like I'm actually there in my mind. And I've had some successful sessions with people, and pretty much the muddy can feel, being the empath part of me and the intuitive, pretty much what's going on in their body. And they're like
Yeah.
amazed and they feel so much better. So I do believe in the distance. It does
This,
work.
this is the future of healing. And science is proving it because they're taking, part of a, um, oh geez, part of an atom, and taking it to a different location. And anything that happens to, or a molecule, anything that happens to the original molecule instantly happens to the molecule that's at a distance with no connection whatsoever, but they have the same response. And it can be, a huge distance. It really doesn't make a difference because when you're dealing in the ethers, it's energetic. So it's so profound. And I've done, as a Reiki practitioner, I've put it out on, sites like pages like Earth We Are One and just said, respond yes or whatever if you'd like to receive Reiki energy, and had upwards to 300 people respond and say that they wanted it to multiply and come back to me, and running all that energy through me to all those people. And people are like, oh my goodness, I feel that. That's, they're instantly being affected because they're sort of lining up with the flow, tuning into that channel. And the catalyst in my life because of offering that was indescribable.
Yes, exactly. I do have a question. You mentioned about a heart wall. For those who may not understand what that is, could you explain what a heart wall is, and what has been and any of your clients that you've worked with, if you've had any heart walls come up, what is the youngest that they've experienced that, or they put the heart wall
Hmm.
up?
I truthfully, I've been working with an assortment of people, and we have worked with the trapped emotions. I haven't had anybody respond very much as far as a heart wall is concerned, but that would be one of the layers that we went to over the course of working with things. And according to Dr. Nelson, his expression of what a heart wall is just sort of an imaginary creation that we have made to protect ourselves it's like the mental layer of it um, seeks to protect the energetic part of us. And like when his wife had a heart wall that he found, and her wall was 5 miles deep, and it was made of hardwood flooring.
Wow.
And her father was in the flooring business. And that, was why that. He said he had one person who had a heart wall that was made of a substance that doesn't exist on planet Earth. It was something they had seen in a movie or whatever, that was something that was absolutely indestructible, and had surrounded their heart with that because they felt so vulnerable. But what people don't realize is that our hearts, in truth, are the least vulnerable part of ourselves. That's our dynamo, and it's not threatened by anything ever. It's our ideas and our expectations that get hurt because we have expectations of other people that get disappointed. Love doesn't ever hurt.
That could you repeat that? Really, really, really repeat that for the listeners. That was powerful, amazing, and phenomenal.
Exactly.
Yeah,
How far back do you want me to go?
about that our hearts are really not what gets hurt. It's our expectations, our minds that really, yeah.
No, well, we're cultured and we're conditioned to a world that doesn't exist anymore. And in that world, the thinking was linear, and, it was a forceful, moving forward sort of energy. And that's not where we are anymore. Where we are since the shift of 2012 is moving into a more feminine energy, moving into the energy of the heart. The heart has grown in its magnitude, literally, its magnetism. They've discovered now that the heart actually is more of a brain to the body than the brain is. And the thing that I think is the most profound about that is that people need to understand love does not hurt. Only our ideas can be hurt because we have the idea that someone else should live up to our expectations. We have the idea that life should be different than, this isn't how I thought it was going to be. So it's only our disappointed ideas that feel hurt. But that's not what love is. That's just an illusion, a delusion, a disappointment. It's a mental thing. It's really not a heart thing. And love is full force forward. And it comes through each of our hearts, in my experience. And if we open that and we allow it to shine, it will guide us every step. And even, like, to quote Jack Canfield, you can make it all the way to California 200 feet at a time, just in the illumination of your headlights. And if you open your heart and allow it to shine and you defer to that, you surrender to the fact that you have a higher connection to the sea of humanity, to the whole universe, to that energy current that does flow through us. And once you surrender to that, it literally will take you with the flow, like you're on that stream that you're on. And to quote Abraham, nobody gets in the whitewater raft and starts paddling really hard upstream. You get in the whitewater raft and you let the current carry you. And for me, that is the blessing that is available to all of us at this point in time. If we can just surrender to that. We're not cultured to surrender. We're cultured to fight. We're not cultured to feel confident. We're cultured to defend and to feel lack and vulnerability. But those are ideas that have been imposed upon us. They aren't ideas that we were born with. Although we do have DNA carryover from previous lifetimes in that, and I understand that. But as we each come in like a brand new little hard drive, we're conditioned according to what our environment is that tells us that, that love is hurtful, that you can't trust, that, all these messages, but they come from other people. And at this point, we have the opportunity, especially with the emotion code as a tool, to unblock ourselves, to unhinge these things that have been, so to speak, holding us in place, that thing that holds you back from moving forward because you just don't feel worthy. Like my friend whose mother felt that it was inappropriate for her to be pregnant at that point in time and really did not welcome that situation. It can bring you to a place to where if your own mother didn't feel that you were welcome, then how do you feel worthy? And how do you create that for yourself in this life? And the point is, you do create it for yourself. We have to create it for ourselves. It's cold comfort for somebody that just wants somebody else to love them the way they want them to love them. But usually they're a mirror for the fact that you're ignoring yourself.
Yeah, that's so funny you say
Mhm.
that because my mother always used to say to me, "I have no idea where I got you from," because she'd say you're as odd as two left shoes, and I'd say thank you, and my older brother always used to say, "What's the color of the sky in your world today, sis?" And I'd say it's still pink and blue, and he's like, "Oh, you and your fairy tales and unicorns," and I was like, "Yep," So it's just funny because then as I got older and, got married and had kids, I realized that, oh wow, all these people think I'm really odd. But when I was going through middle school and high school and, college, I didn't care. But then I got married and I had kids and I started to care and I started carrying that bag of labels, that I'm as odd as two left shoes. But then over the last 10 or 15 years, I guess since my divorce or prior to, I started like, oh well, I'm me again. I'm really, so I am those two left shoes, and either you like me that way or you don't. So I really like your explanation of that. So-
Oh, and just for the record, my father called it sky blue pink.
well, there you go. My sky's the same, Vicky. Welcome to my world.
Hey, that's what the sunset and the sunrise look like. It's glorious and beautiful if you look at it from. Yeah, I don't. as I say it, I know it's a lie because I do understand, but I don't understand why people can't revere their individuality and just celebrate and exemplify and share that, as opposed to the whole idea of people fitting in. Oh, you have to do it this way, or what will the neighbors say? Oh, please. you know, it, you have to live in your own life. So I think I commented on one of your posts the other day, Joanne, that you you're responsible for one life
Right.
coming in. And if you don't take responsibility for that above and beyond everything else, then you're going to be at the behest of the rest of the world. That can feel very cruel. It's not until you step into your own and say, no, this is mine, and you don't have to like it, that, it is what it is. Like the lady with the broken leg, she gave me a t-shirt. It said, I am who I am. Your approval is not required. I said, well, it's good to be known.
Yep. Well, that's the thing. We get attached to other people's ideas and what they think of us. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's what we think of ourselves and being happy and loving ourselves.
It's really amazing to me, the labyrinth and the myriad of different opinions that people have of me, because, you can go right from dirt to descended from the right hand of God, and there's every opinion in between that everybody's got about me. And if I walk
Hmm.
into a room and they say, oh, we were just talking about you, I just say, do I need to live up to it or live it down?
Right. That's
Because
great.
whatever.
Todd, and I'd like to answer your question about the heart wall, just in case there are listeners out there that was inquiring. In my emotional coding, when I had it done, um, mine was 11, age 11. They felt the heart wall go up and pinpointed it to that was the first time that I experienced a major death in my life. A really good friend, a close person, had passed away. And I experienced it, put the instant heart wall up because I wasn't conditioned, didn't have the support then, was 40 years ago. So I put the heart wall up. They felt the heart wall go very deep. Mine was made out of concrete. Hey, my father was Italian, you know what I'm saying? Concrete boots. So I put the
Oh,
concrete
God.
up. So that's the we took it down, and then I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to find the where, the what, the why, the situation. And over the years, I've worked on that. And in just, believe it or not, doing the shadow self interviews and the work, Todd and I do a lot of work behind the scenes, and we go more in depth with ourselves. And in just the last 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, I've even found out more about myself, about that heart wall, so that I can go further into the shadow self work and take it further into the next step of our program. So thank you for coming on the show with this emotional coding and sharing that part. And thank you, Todd, for bringing that question in, because it is important to know that our hearts are open and should remain open, because Vicky, that part that you shared, um, our hearts are the most giving, are they are the most loving and the most giving.
Well, if you have a heart wall up, obviously, the way I see it is, if you have a heart wall, you're not loving yourself and not allowing to love yourself and allow to love other people. Is that correct?
Well, it's that's not necessarily true. You can love and love other people, but sometimes you don't allow others to love you
Yeah.
because of the fear that they're going to be taken away.
Right.
So yeah, so that there's a lot of different ways that plays out, but um, it's tricky.
And when I was growing up, I remember my mom's been passed for 35 years, but one thing that I remember like a mantra in my head from her is choose love, choose love, choose love, choose love, choose love, choose love. So I knew I should always choose love, but I thought, love of who? Love of what? Love for how
Hmm.
long?
Yeah.
I mean, what does this really entail? And in recent years, I've come to the understanding that you love yourself
Hmm.
first. And a lot of people don't know what that even looks like. It's like, if you're sitting there thirsty, get up and go get a drink. If you're tired, lay down. Tune in to your own connection between heaven and earth. and see when there's distress there. Be the first one to notice. Be the first one to look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and say, "Good morning, beautiful. Happy birthday. Welcome to another day. Thanks for joining me," to your body that has come into this life with you as your most loyal relationship ever. And that is the key to me at this point in time, is that you surrender to loving yourself first, and then you're a full vessel. I mean, that is your cup half empty or half full? Who cares? Who wants to live a half life? Fill that thing up. You can fill it to overflowing every day. Our hearts are filled with $1 million worth of love currency to spend freely every day, and it replenishes during our sleep every night.
You're so right. I do that. I own 3 tiaras, and I'm not joking. And I wear them.
And they look good on you, too. I gave a friend to a tiara, 2 tiaras that needed just that message. One has a butterfly and the other is encrusted. Just because, I love to listen to the work of Matt Kahn, because he talks about our emotional bank account and how, you put $10 in your emotional bank account when you're $1 million overdrawn. It really doesn't have that big effect. You have to keep doing it, and that we should appreciate. It's like, you ever think that maybe all the crap you're seeing on the news is just to remind you how much better you're doing than that? You haven't killed anybody today. Good on you. There's a good start. Did you notice how I walked across the floor heel toe? I mean, there are babies around here crawling, not this person, no. And I walked over to the refrigerator. I pulled it open with one pull with my Herculean strength, and you make yourself laugh. You make light. Bring some joy into your life and put some deposits in your own emotional bank account until you start to realize that to yourself, you're worthy.
Exactly. Well, this has been fascinating. I'm just absorbing all this information, and I found it very helpful. I hope the listeners have too. Vicky, if anyone wanted to get in contact with you for further questions or to know more about the emotion code, how could they get a hold of you?
Well, I have 2 different places on Facebook. Vicky Willoughby is my personal page. And then I have Victoria Willoughby, which is titled Freedom Through Responsibility. They can certainly call me or text me personally. My number is 315-343-7045. It's public. Share it. I will respond. Leave a voicemail if I'm not able to pick up right away and you call. Those would be the prime methods, or at vickywilloughby8@gmail.com. 8 being the numeral 8, because I'm 8 of 8 in my family. Those would be the preferred methods from my point of
Awesome.
view.
So I will have those in the show notes, so people will be able to get in touch with you. Vicky, this has been awesome. Thank you for spending the time with us tonight to have this conversation. It has been absolutely wonderful.
It is my blessing. Thank you so much for including me. I appreciate your work very much.
Thank you so much, Vicky. Bye. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a great night.
Everybody have a good night.